Good evening, everyone. Yeah, we're getting all set up here. We've got monitors in the back. We've got lots of people. Let's open our time in a word of prayer, shall we? Father, we thank you for this day you have given us to gather together to worship you this morning and now this evening to have a rather general meeting. And we just thank you, Lord, for what you're doing in the life of our church, for what you are doing in our lives, even as individuals. And we pray that our time here this evening would be an encouragement, that it would be something you would use to further the work that you are doing here as we become more and more like-minded, more and more aware of what you are doing. Lord, we ask that you would work through us this evening to bring honor and glory to yourself. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So without any further ado, I'm going to have Ross come up and give us his, there he is, financial update.
Good evening. Ooh, that's bright. Big picture is, hi, by the way. Big picture is money's coming in, we're spending stuff, and there's money in the bank. And so, but there's a few more details to it than that. Yay, okay, thank you very much. All right. So we're really just want to talk to you about, just give you an idea and pictures and things as to how we're doing. You know, you think about during the COVID years, and people are talking about how churches are closing and people losing jobs, and so you have this picture of downward trends in giving, downward trends in attendance, things such as that. But it's not so. God's been very faithful here through you, through your hearts of giving, and we're in pretty good shape. Overall, we're much healthier than many churches, I would imagine. Our bankers are kind of thrilled and excited about how we're doing because we pay the mortgage to them. They like to see that we can still pay the mortgage. But overall, we're really doing well. We're thankful to God that He's been supplying for the church and sustaining us through this last crazy year and a half, almost 2 years now. So I'm going to give you just some quick updates as to what's going on here with, this is so neat, Desmond, how I can just do this stuff and not have to worry about it. Just want to give you some ideas as to where the trends are going. And first I'm going to talk about average weekly, 52 weeks total tithes and offerings. This is just by members over the last 10 years, okay? So you can see how the overall trend is up. Let me see if I want to try this thing here. He gave me this neat little pointer deal. I can do this. Look at that. So, but you can see the angle is up. Up is good. Woohoo! Like that. Okay. So we're looking pretty good there. And we're really thankful for that. Right now, at this part here, we're at about, this is members only, about 21,600 on average each week. 21,600 coming in tithes and offerings. So you add maybe $3,000, $4,000 on top of that with guests. And, I guess I got to close that first to make that go. I did the done thing. Okay. All right, so this one's a little bit different, okay? And you're going to say, okay, this one's different. I want to get my thing back here. Because this number here, this blue line doesn't correspond to the previous one. This one looks like closer to 25,000 because that includes members and guests, okay? So this is an overall graph. So as you can see, giving, again, at this point is overall up these last few fiscal years here, looking pretty good. And this green line here is all of our income. So that would include things like money that came in for discipleship ministries, women's ministries, men's ministries, things such as that. Anything else that came in, benevolence fund, money that came into various accounts that we have. So that's the green line. And the red line, boo, is the expenses line. We don't really like expenses as much as we like the income, but it's okay. We have to have it. So, interestingly enough, it looks like there's been a huge increase here in expenses, and there was the 2 or 3 main things that accounted for that was the introduction of the radio ministry. So we started funding the radio ministry each month. And then also for local evangelism, we were supporting local evangelists. And then also having a new building has some initial costs and things that it's quite, $55,000 is quite expensive to maintain and do the fit outs and things like that. So overall though, if you see the line here, if this continues, should be crossing pretty soon. And so we should be in the red, if you will. Pretty soon. That's, Lord willing. Okay. Let's see. We got a good done and a cross. Okay. Now, of the people that gave that, here's over the last 3 years. Again, the first chart, you can see that membership has been fairly consistent over the last 3 years. However, you note this little number of members here. You see this increase here. There's an increase here, there's an increase right here. Those are membership Sundays, so you can see the increase in number of members. And overall right now, we have, as of today, this is actually the highest number of members that we've ever had. And again, this is in a COVID year, so that's really been kind of wonderful, interesting, outstanding to see. We've added 30 some odd people, about almost 40 people, and about 23 or 24 households. So this is the households down here. This is the members up here. So right now we have 345 members and 223 households, member households altogether. Okay. So, and this, by the way, is the almost last 3 years. It's not really the last 3 years because we're talking from January of 2019 to September 2021, so almost 3 years. Let's get it done. All right, back to members. So this is the average weekly offerings by members, and again, overall, the graph seems to be on an upward trend. You got some ups and downs and things such as that, but overall, looking pretty substantial, pretty consistent. Thing with consistency, I work with these numbers all the time, and I see the money coming in and the money going out, and then all those discussions of senior pastor hires and associate pastor hires and 8,000 square feet of phase 2 over there to fit out and have it become occupied and usable. So there's a lot of expenses that are on the horizon that if I look at the numbers today, I'm thinking, gee, and a lot of people looking at them going, how in the world do we afford all that? And I think the history of this church has been such that we've taken steps of faith that didn't look 100% clear on paper, but God supplied in amazing ways throughout whenever we had needs. The whole story is, we can go back to from the Fulton to Oakland Mills to here to how all that stuff worked. And it's just that God just provided in various ways. So though we don't see a huge amount of excess, huge savings accounts, I think when the times come and we have people that need to be hired and things such as that, God is faithful, and I'm pretty confident that we're going to be in pretty good step. Next is, all right, average. This can probably start to look all the same, right? So average monthly tithes and offerings per member household. So if you take the member households of those 224 or so, actually it's 224 that have given, then the average amount per month that each of those households gave was this line here. And this is the only one I actually have a trend line in. You can see this coming down here. So it's on a slightly negative, which pretty much says that overall the trend is somewhat, people are giving a little less per household, but it's very, very hard to quantify because we have new members and then members leaving and things such as that. So this is a dynamic process where it's not an exact, you had 100 people here and at the end of the period, the same 100 people are giving a little bit less. So it doesn't really work that way. Overall, it's not too bad. Always room for improvement, for sacrifice on all of our parts, but we're still looking pretty good. These two periods here are year-end giving. So you can see this big bumps. You go, wow, what happened there? It's always right down here in the December, January time frame. Okay? Okay. Of the member households that gave, but do not include the members that have become, the new members of the last 12 months, okay? So go back 12 months, and that group of member households, this is the distribution. So those that gave, that didn't give anything, let me take a caveat. Whoop, sorry, I gotta turn this thing on. So where it says 0, it's possible that there's some families that didn't give 0, but that we did have some overall cash, anonymous cash that comes in. That could come in from member families, but we just don't know, okay? But overall, the identified households, 27 households really didn't participate in giving to the finances. 91 households gave between $100 and $500 a month. 43 gave between $501 and $1,000. 16 households, $1,000 to $1,500, and 10 households are $1,500 and above, or above $1,500. So that's the overall distribution that seemed to be pretty consistent over the last 24 years. It seems to be almost like a third, a third, a third, where a third gives substantially, a third gives well, and a third doesn't give well. Not sure why that it's maintained that way, but it seems that from year to year to year, that's exactly what we've seen. So this is not a surprising slide. Okay, all right, here's where your eyes will go. Let me just show you a couple things here. All this is going to show you here is, I'm sorry I'm staring down here, but I'm looking at this thing. So the green is the good stuff, right? Green here, green, good stuff. Orange or reddish is bad stuff, okay? Income and outflow, okay? So in fiscal year 2020, which ended on June 30th of 2020, our income was close to $99,000. We spent about $94,500. So our net income was $4,380, okay? That was per month, okay, on average. Fiscal year 21, a little bit higher, okay? This one you see it was like $10,193. Well, why is that? During COVID, there was a lot of ministries that weren't spending money. And so a lot of that, the saving, that people were still being faithful to give, but the ministries were not spending. So we had a higher saving or higher net income during that year. And then this year, these are actual numbers here. And this is the budget for this year, starting in July 1st of this year, where our income budget is $110,000 a month, expenses $102,000, so we anticipate about $8,000 a month in excess. Excess becomes savings. It's not a separate savings account, but it goes to the general account. We anticipate, as we hopefully, Lord willing, will get a senior pastor in the next not too near future, that net income will reduce, and that's a good thing because we will then have a senior pastor. But this again is the budget numbers. I think you've all had access to that. If you don't, if you didn't, or if you'd like to see it, any member can get these numbers at any time. On the bottom, we have 4 separate accounts, so they sort of operate separately. We have our operating account, which pays for all this stuff and the income and the outflow and the payroll and things like that. But then there's the Discover Hope Radio has its own account, Hope Academy, Gamma, or TMF, whoever they are today, and then the benevolence account, okay, the benevolence fund. So those are 4 separate bank accounts that aren't really they don't really reflect up here, but you can just see down here that Hope Radio was actually an expense. The church is funding Hope Radio over the first few years here, and the hope is over time that would become listener supported. But to date, there's not a lot that's coming in from listener support. So right now it's an expense to the church. So that's where you can see the expenses here. And then it's budgeted for a lot less this year, just for the strategy that Dave Nixon has taken the radio ministry. And then these three down here, there's no real separate budget item, these numbers here, because they basically do what they do in themselves. So Hope Academy, they have their own profit and loss statement, their own cash flow and everything like that, their own bank account. Gamma hasn't really been that active, and the Benevolence Fund was really substantially helpful this last year with COVID and things. People really gave out of their hearts and things, and there were definitely some needs from that. So that was really a blessing in a great way. Okay. Finally, this is where we are as of, it says of the 30th, but it's actually as of today. I just checked the numbers. Well, as a matter of fact, there was a double entry, so this number here should actually be about $8,000 higher. So that's where we are right now in their operating account, about $275,000 right now. We have a money market that is sort of like an emergency fund. It's a savings account there. It makes very little interest, $176,000. Capital reserve is something that we actually instituted this year. Perhaps should have done it earlier. But now that we have this big building, we anticipate, because of depreciation and wear and tear and things like that, we're going to have to replace things like HVAC systems and roofs and things like that. So we started chunking money into this account each month, and that money is going to be available. And when you give to the building fund, that goes into this capital reserve account. And that's going to be used to replace things like HVAC systems and all these various pieces. Okay? Benevolence Fund is self-explanatory. Hope Academy account, TMF. Discover Hope Radio still has money. It's funded again each month by the church. And we have securities holdings. We have had in the past, people gave securities to the church as a gift, as offerings. And so they are in an account, and they've accrued some interest or some unrealized gains there. And so that's currently about $63,000. Overall financial assets is about $685,000. And when you look at our net worth, building, mortgage, all these various things, you put these things together, we're probably at about $2.2 or $2.3 million net worth right now, which to me is amazing, because this church has gone for like almost a little nothing. And remember when we got $5,000 in the bank once, it was like, whoa, we made it, it was great. This was way, way back. But that is pretty much all I've got. That's the financial picture in a nutshell. I would say if there's any questions, we want to do those now, Alan, or later? Okay, any particular questions that, yeah, Ann? Ann is asking what's the estimate worth of this building. Well, it's kind of hard to say because it has to be put to market and things such as that. The tax rolls looks at it at around, I think, $7.5 million right now, but I think it would be appraised at close to $8 million right now, based upon things I've seen, especially with the real estate run-up. That's just a rough guess based on something I remember reading somewhere. Might have been Zillow, I don't know. Yeah, give or take $1 million, a billion. Nowadays we're talking trillions, so let's go there. Any other questions? Okay, if you have any other questions at any other time, feel free to ask. Okay. That would look like Jeff.
I was going to say good morning, but it's not good morning. It's dark outside. My name is Jeff Fine, and tonight I'm going to present some facility updates. I'm going to give you a couple of highlight exciting things that have been happening, but before I get to that, I also want to bring your attention to the fact that this is a 55,000 square foot facility, and there's a lot that goes on daily, behind the scenes, up in the ceilings, and cleaning this place. There's a lot of activity that goes on here. I know the Dossets are out there cleaning all the time. Bill Beidler, Bill Waller's got a team. They always have activities going on. In fact, I do want to kind of plug their what they do out here. And I love one. Bill had asked me, he needed some help. He needed someone to count light bulbs. And I said, light bulbs? And he said, yeah, we have about like 80 light bulbs throughout this building. It would be a huge burden lifted off his shoulder if he could get someone to just report on what light bulbs need to be replaced. So it sounds simple, but it really impacts the way we do ministry. Imagine just coming into a room one day and the light bulbs are all gone. And I say that so you know you don't have to be an engineer to help out on the activities of the facilities, but we could give you an engineering title. So I'm going to go to some of the exciting highlights. This is our pretty much our facility today, and I'm going to touch on 3 topics. And you could see, I'm going to try this fancy little button here. The children's youth area, which is over here in green. This one, number 1. And number 2, I have over here, we're going to talk about the kitchen upgrade. And then last but not least, we'll talk about the phase 2 area, which is that nebulous, giant area that no one has gone into. No? There it is. Okay. Children and youth area. So up on the screen here, going from left to right. Left is kind of where we are, or where we used to be, and the red arrow shows where we are today. I'm going to start down at the bottom there in that little red square. As you can see, there's been 2 new rooms put in there. We've had quite a large uptick in growth in the children's area, which includes not only Sunday morning classes, but also Hope Academy. There's been a real need to expand that area, and this has just happened recently, last month. So if you walk down there, you'll see these 2 new rooms that are currently being placed into use. So we've added 2 new rooms down there in the children's ministry, and then up above, there's HA Library way at the top, your top right. That has also been fitted for Hope Academy. They're going to be putting their books and supplies in there. Also a well-needed facility for them. They've had a lot of issues with storage, and it's not exactly drawn to scale. It's a little bit smaller than what you see there, but it really alleviates their need for their books and other supplies. I also wanted to highlight the youth room. We've also had quite a bit of growth in the youth ministry. Currently, they're still back there, as well as there's a lot of materials that are stored back there. Our next kind of push will be to try to readjust where all that material is, because we want to give our youth some room to grow, and that's where they're going to be, and that's where our focus is going to be next, is on that youth area up there. Also, one other thing I did want to mention was, Ross had mentioned HVAC systems. Right above that children's area, there is 2 systems. We're going to bring in a new one and combine. We'll take the 2 that are there and combine into one large one. Every Sunday, some of the facility folks would have to be going back and making sure the temperatures were right and the airflow was right. Those systems were 20, 25 years old, and there were lots of issues that had to kind of be fixed on the run. So we have decided, let's do this now, especially before winter comes in, and get those systems right. Kitchen upgrade was kind of interesting. I just went in there this morning, and they've already cut a big hole in the wall, and they are about to start taking what we have today, which is more of a warming kitchen, and convert it into a real commercial-sized kitchen. So what are they doing right now? So right now we've gotten a structural design. They're going to start putting in the ventilation and the electrical instruments and the plumbing. There's a lot of work that needs to get done before we even start to begin to bring the appliances in. What you see up here, this is not what we have now. This is just kind of an example of what a commercial kitchen looks like. So we're not here yet, but we are right now. There's a giant hood like you see up here, and currently there's a big hole in the wall. We're going to start to put that in. Before we do that, there's a lot, like I had mentioned, things going on in the ceiling. Well, you have to structurally put this onto something. I know it's not really the right way to describe it, but there's structural beams, there's ventilation, there's a lot of things that go on up above in the ceiling that need to go in first before things like a giant hood is going to go in. But we'll have real gas ovens and stoves there. It will take us from where we are today, which is, and it was, we had, I think, at one of the last events, we were making sandwiches, which were great. They were fantastic. But with a commercial kitchen, we'll be able to serve so much better. We'll be able to, when we have gamma, when we have banquets or fellowship lunches, we'll actually really be able to serve beyond just making sandwiches. So this is really something that we see will really impact all the ministries and activities that go on here and give us that opportunity to really now start serving food. Again, the purpose to support larger events that have these types of food requirements where we can now do cooking instead of simply warming up food. I did write down an estimated start date in November, but it looks like they've already started. So this is one of the other big projects currently moving today. And then phase two. Phase two is this large area over here. It's been empty for a number of years. And we've kind of been waiting to see what we want to do with it. And I'm just going to say, make a couple of points here. Our initial objective is to get it into use. It's been there for a long time. It's been mostly storage. But recently, we've been moving things out. And I don't have a current picture of it. But it is a big empty room now. There's a lot of things that are gone. The ceiling is gone. There's things hanging down. But we really want to get it into use. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to is this. You see this pink kind of outline. That's going to be kind of an expanded corridor that's going to wrap around this whole area. What it does is it essentially gives us a little more space in the center. So right now, this currently, it has a capacity of about 800 people, if we wanted to get in there. Currently, it would be a little tighter, but now with this wraparound corridor, it gives us a little extra room. It also gives us a little more in terms of insulation from the weather. And it also is nice because it allows people to go around the entire area without having to cross through. We'll have several entrances. So the accessibility is a lot more, rather than just having to come in through one spot, you'll be able to go all the way around and come in multiple entries. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is that little picture on the bottom. This right here. This is actually going to be right in this area. It's going to give us a new facade, and kind of one of the advantages of that is when you drive by this building, this business park, we really don't stand out very much except for the sign. But with this kind of face, now you know that there's a church there. It's a really nice entryway, and again, it really distinguishes us from just being just a business park. So our initial purpose is really to get this room into use, even if it's just open and nothing there at the moment. We're going to wait for our senior pastor. One thing we do want to do is we want input, and we want to include our senior pastor, and hopefully, if we can get one soon, rather than telling the senior pastor what our direction is, we want input from our senior pastor. So it makes sense to start at least opening this room up, get a wraparound corridor, put a nice face on the front, and that will take some time, but it is currently in the works. And hopeful that by the time we get a new senior pastor, we'll have a little more direction as to what we want. There's a lot of options here, and so rather than cementing us into, well, this is what we're going to use this room for, we're going to go step by step. And so when we get all interested parties together, we'll have a little more direction as to where we want to go. I think that's all I had. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have some more pictures. this is what your current kitchen looks like today. So, and that big metal hood is what's going to go up onto the top of on the ceiling. But this is what we have today. And again, if you go back to the other picture, that's something that we want. So it's really it's a big improvement. And I do have a picture of what that big open phase 2 room looks like today. Who knew there was so much stuff going on up above the ceiling, right? There's a lot going on there. But as you can see, the good news is we are moving forward. We're going to get that cleared out and hopefully get it into use as soon as we can. And I believe that's all I have. Any questions? I can take questions now or later. Yeah. Those are 2 fantastic questions. So storage, we just bought a large storage unit. It's out in the back. It sits out in the back. We have that, and we have a trailer. There's also a lot of ministry things that still remain there. There's some personal things that remain there. And so we're going to work on getting things out to people. Perhaps they've forgotten that there's stuff there. And things that remain, we'll probably start moving them out to the trailers. There's a trailer and a storage unit out there. And then your second question was, I just forgot. What are we going to do with this? Yeah. So a lot of things can happen with this room. So whether it could be a multi-purpose room. We could have a worship over there and use this as a multi-purpose room. We can use, so this room hasn't yet been defined yet, but it is ready to go. The nice thing about a large room is you could take something like this and you could put in, we can make this into classrooms. There's a lot of options we have, kind of by looking at where we want to start, where do we want to focus our ministries? Do we want to have more classrooms? Well, we can make this into more classrooms. Do we, think about, there's a lot of options. So once we have 2 large rooms, again, this could be a multi-purpose room. But any other questions out there? Ann? Yep. So yeah, this room seats about 500. Currently, we're around 300 people today. And so if you look at kind of our growth rate is about 6%. So that would be about 7 or 8 years, we would reach maximum capacity. If we turned the phase 2 into a new worship center, maximum capacity would be about 800. So then your next question is, okay, where are you going to put all those kids? So again, if we had to turn this room into adult classrooms, we could do that. And then we could convert the current adult classrooms into children's classrooms. It's a possibility. Yep. I don't have a slide here, but I could tell you we were another kind of question or push was to, what would the church look like in 20 years? And so really think outside of the box. And there's been a lot of great discussions and possibilities. I mean, we own all the way behind. There's a giant area behind here. People have even talked about going up another floor. There's also this whole business park. There's a lot of potential here. And again, depending on the growth of the church and kind of, where we want to focus our ministries, we have a lot of options. But yeah, we definitely, deacons and elders and building folks have been thinking about this. It's a great question. Look, where do we, what does this place need to look like in 10 years?
We're going to start using the microphones just so everybody can hear, and also for the folks that can't attend, that would like to watch the playback. This helps.
2 things. First of all, if we don't need to turn this into classrooms, I'd just like to put in a plug for a gym. That'd be really great. My question was, when you had the map up for the children's ministry area change, I noticed in the new one, the room that we dearly call the bunker is gone. Is that room going away? It's the cinder block room.
Do I not have it on here?
In the previous one, it's the 10 to 12 room, but in the new, well, no, go back to the other one.
That one?
On the left side, it's the 10 to 12-year-old room.
Oh.
But on the right side,
Yeah,
it's not there.
sorry. There's like multiple iterations of this, so yeah. I just wanted to highlight just those kind of 3 areas. It's
Okay,
still
so
there.
that room's
It's
still
still
gonna
there.
stay.
It's still there.
Okay,
It's still
just
there.
making
Sorry.
sure.
Oh.
Just curious, how wide is that corridor that would be wrapping around the?
That's a good question. So if you kind of looked out there, I don't think it would go out to the sidewalk. Is it? Oh, it is 8.5 feet. I don't think it goes past the sidewalk. Something like from the front of the building almost to the sidewalk, I believe. So not real far, but enough that meets the local zoning requirements. Do we want to let Gabe go? And then I'm always happy to answer questions. I'll take one more. One more question? Is there anybody else? I'm always available. And I can give you Brian's personal home number for anything. Should we go college with Gabe?
All right, great. Thanks, Brian. I wanted to give you just a quick update on the counseling ministry in case you're wondering what I've been doing all day. It's very similar to a couple years ago. You know that our counseling ministry we call Hope Biblical Counseling Ministry. And last year we announced that we became a certified training center, and we showed you that little logo on the right side there. But at this year's annual ACBC conference, which was earlier this year, I was presented with a certificate, which you see a picture of. I took that with my cell phone. That's why there's that reflection of the ceiling light there. But that was an encouraging time, and so just a reminder that we're a certified training center with ACBC, which means that if you take the class that we offer every winter, then you can pursue certification. That class meets the requirement, as well as future classes that we're going to offer for advanced training. So just a reminder about that class. It's a 34-hour class spread out over 4 weekends and 4 months. And up to date, we've trained over 135 people, many of which are outside of our church. And then this coming year, this should be 2022, not 2021. So starting in January, our new class, we actually have 3 satellite locations. There's a church in West Virginia, a church in Virginia, and another church here in Maryland that people can go and participate in that class while it's being live streamed. In terms of certified counselors, the most exciting thing is that Karen Warren became a certified counselor this year. It's a lot of hard work, so very grateful for her commitment to do that. And then I just put on there that I'm a fellow candidate, and what that simply means is once I become a fellow, I can supervise candidates who are pursuing certification. And so as a candidate, I'm being supervised as I'm supervising a couple individuals, Hong Fine and soon, Lord willing, Margot Guillory. And these are the folks still in pursuit. Mike Moody is almost done. He just has, I think, 4 more counseling sessions before he gets certified. And then Hong just began her counseling hours. Margot's just about done with her exams. And Becky's still working on her exams. So I'm excited about that. If you're interested in serving the Lord in the counseling ministry, please let me know. Over the last few years, or 3 years since I've been here, we've done over 1,300 hours of counseling, and that includes over 90 individuals or couples. Of course, the majority of that is the counseling that I've done, but now Mike and Karen and now Hong are really contributing to that. So as you know, our heart's desire is first and foremost to meet the needs of our own church, to counsel those in need with God's word, and then, as the Lord allows, to minister to others outside of our church, whether it's people who go to other churches or people who don't have a church, and to be basically an outreach and help strengthen other local churches. Grief Share, which you've heard about this morning, we've done a couple more cycles of that since last year. I'm so grateful for Diane Baldridge. It's really a passion of her heart, and she does it so well, and she's really been the primary leader of that, and so we've continued to serve that or offer that ministry, and that will continue to be a thing that we do. And then next year, if you're interested in participating in the ACBC National Conference, it's open to everyone. You don't have to be a certified counselor. It's just a really edifying, encouraging time. It'll be in Memphis, Tennessee. The theme is In His Image, Recovering Human Dignity. And I get the privilege of being one of the breakout speakers, not a plenary speaker, but a breakout speaker, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'll also be doing an online seminar that they'll offer live, so I'm going to have to record that in advance. So, I don't know, maybe sometime in July or something, we'll have a Sunday night where I get to teach that class, so we record it and send it in. So be looking out for that. We'll be talking about getting to the place of forgiveness. That's the counseling ministry. I'm just going to assume there's no questions on that, unless there aren't, but I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Allen, and he and I he'll lead, and now we'll give you the pastoral candidate update.
Thanks, Gabe. Actually, we have to get rid of, okay. If you've been around a while, you know that we have, for quite a long time, been longing for a biblical counseling ministry here at the church. And Pastor Leek, on several occasions, very wisely said, you know, when people are under expositional preaching, week in, week out, and they're dealing with the sin in their lives because of their interaction with Scripture and being under that teaching, that kind of generates a lot of need for counseling and helping people work through their issues. And it was a desire of ours for a long time to see that happen. We essentially made an offer to a very experienced biblical counselor to come and join us as long as he was willing to work for free, because we didn't have the resources. That didn't work out. But finally, the Lord freed up the resources to bring Pastor Gabe. And fortunately, his vision, too, is not just that he's the biblical counselor, but he's training up others. And we're seeing the fruit of that already. So praise God. Amen. So we wanted to also give you an update on our senior pastor search. You've been hearing a few things, dribs and drabs, and so we wanted to bring you up to date officially, answer questions, and so on. But I wanted to start with an overview of what we're looking for. And this has drawn mostly from guidance that Pastor Leek gave to us in the last year. But first and foremost, we want to make sure that whoever becomes the next senior pastor is in complete alignment with our doctrine and our philosophy of ministry. Non-negotiable. Next, and I don't know actually how you put the two of those together, but I see them hand in hand. We're looking for a skilled expositor called to pulpit ministry. Again, non-negotiable. You know, we have a fondness for guys who are just out of seminary. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who is a skilled expositor, lots of experience and giftedness and passion to exposit the word week in, week out. And so there needs to be some track record there, right? Also, he needs to share our vision for our role as a church within our region. That's very much about what we are, again, because of Pastor Leake's leadership. And we don't see that going away just because Pastor Leake is no longer with us. That we have a responsibility even to help a lot of these other churches because they're at now where we had been some years ago. And working together as like-minded churches and a growing number, hopefully, of like-minded churches is what we're all about. And so we're looking for someone who embraces that as well. He wouldn't necessarily immediately become the leader of that, but he needs to be committed to that. Next, I sort of hinted that we're looking for someone with extensive experience, not just in preaching, but in being a senior pastor. It's a lot different in many ways from just being an associate pastor who's focused in a little piece of the church versus a senior pastor who's regularly looking at the overall oversight and direction of the church. And so ideally, we would have someone who has significant senior pastor experience. Now, I don't know if you're thinking this through like I do, but that creates a challenge. Ideally, this guy would even be active as a senior pastor now. But we don't want to be involved in shepherd stealing any more than we want to be involved in sheep stealing, right? So it'll have to be a work of God that someone of those credentials is available and willing to come here. And more importantly, perhaps, his church is willing for him to come here. That's not a no-brainer. And so we need to be sensitive to those dynamics and so on. It's not that it's impossible, but we need to realize that, well, it's going to be a work of God if that works out. Clearly, we need someone who is an effective shepherd, right? So there's a tenderness there, a humility, and an awareness of where people are at, how to minister to them, how to marshal the forces of other people to help minister to needs and so on. A tender, humble shepherd. And it should go obvious as well, he needs to have a solid family life. Now, it's not impossible that he could be single, but typically he would be married and he would have a track record of a solid family life so as to be the kind of example that we read about in 1 Peter 5, for example. And then an excellent reputation so that, every pastor, every elder needs to be above reproach and have a solid reputation with the community as well as in the church. But it would help us immensely if our next senior pastor was not unknown, but somebody who is known, at least in our circles, as being trustworthy, faithful to these things, and so on. Real simple, right? No. What about our process? Well, before we began, we worked through what process we would go through and realized that it wouldn't be at all, well, not exactly anyway, the same as the process we went through to hire Pastor Gabe. That was a different situation, and it was more narrowly defined and had some similarities here, but this is now for a senior pastor. That would be something completely different. And so We assembled a search committee in early May. The search committee was going to have a completely different role from the search committee that was involved in Pastor Gabe's hire. We didn't know from the outset how many applications we would get, but because of the high standard and the experience and so on, we were hoping that we weren't going to get just any old buddy applying, and actually that's been the case, fortunately. Otherwise, the search committee would have had to do some of that initial vetting. They really haven't had to do that much for this. They're helping to kind of get a sense of a cross-section of the church, of the congregation, and evaluating those who have applied, but they're not needed as much administratively as they had been. I don't know how many applicants we got for Pastor Gabe's position, but it was a lot. Most of them, I think, were just no-brainers, no. But there was a lot of sifting through all that, which we haven't had to do as much of this time. So then we move into phase one, which we began in mid-May, where we sent out a letter, an email, to our regional pastors here in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Masters Fellowship Associated Pastors, as well as trusted pastors nationwide. As part of that same like-minded doctrinally philosophy of ministry network, and just asking them, do you know of anybody you would recommend? And try to short-circuit just generic postings at that point, but are there people who you would recommend who maybe are available, meet these criteria, and so on? And actually that did help. Some of the contacts that came from that did apply, and so that was a helpful start. But then in early May, we went into phase two, where in addition to that, we did post the job description and the requirements and so on job boards at a few seminaries. The Master's Seminary, obviously, and Expositor Seminary, and I guess Shepherd Seminary. They don't all have job boards, but connecting with those people. And then in phase three, after we had gotten several applications through that process, we began some initial vetting of those who did apply. And so the elders, the search committee, key leaders, and even asking the pastors from our region, from the Masters Fellowship, to weigh in as well. And then in phase four, beginning in September and then continuing into early October, we actually conducted some interviews of the leading candidate of the ones who had applied by way of Zoom. We've gotten so used to Zoom these days, and it actually turned out to be very helpful. And so we as elders, other key leaders, the search committee, the staff, deacons, women leaders at various times had these conversations with this one candidate. And that was a bit of a process, kind of a getting to know each other and asking important questions and that kind of thing. It wasn't quite like being there in person, but it was helpful to see if there are any red flags, right? And I'm sure he had the same thought as well. Are there any red flags here I need to be worried about? That was kind of the point. And I wanted to emphasize here that because of this possible raising of red flags, either we could make a decision, no, this isn't working right, it's not the right fit, or whoever we're interviewing could come to that same conclusion that, no, it doesn't seem like the right fit. And so people can withdraw or be removed from the process at any time. And so phase 5, and we're right on the threshold of entering phase 5, where we would bring the leading candidate out here for a whole week, where he would, the candidate and his wife, he would preach on a Sunday, but even before that, he would meet with various groups, including some he's already Zoomed with, but broader cross-sections of the church as well. Lots of opportunities for all of us to interact with him, both he and his wife, and ask questions and so on. And there would even be a congregational meeting like this with him still here on that Sunday evening, where we could all hear from him personally about, personal stuff about him and his visions, and ask him questions and have a more personal time like that. That would take us to phase 6 if, at the end of that, the elders decide that, yeah, there are no red flags yet, let's move the process along. Phase 6 would involve the leading candidate and his wife and his whole family to come for a week here at the church to get involved in ministries, get to know people, and kind of further that process along. After which, we would have, after they leave, we would have a congregational meeting amongst ourselves, again for gaining as much insight as people have. Perhaps a few other questions, but getting as much input as we can from the whole congregation, so that there would at that point then be enough information where the elders can make a decision, yay or nay, up or down, right? And that's where we're headed, we hope, by God's grace, to get to that point. And so, since we began that process, we've had 8 applicants. Count them, 8 applicants since mid-May. But only one candidate meets all of our criteria, and in fact, even more. He's highly recommended by people we trust or who know our church well. There has been, more recently, another applicant who, as far as we can tell, meets our much of our criteria, although there's not enough, we haven't had as much interaction with him to check on some other things. But because of his current ministry situation, we're inclined to not pursue him at this point, particularly since we think we have a stronger candidate who's a possibility. But most of the other ones are pretty clearly not quite meeting all of the qualifications. So it's not like it's been a hard process, decision-wise, so far. Well, our leading candidate has given us permission to share with you something about him tonight. His name is Pastor Jeff Krotz. He's, as you can tell here, he's trained at the Master's Seminary, ACBC qualified, level 2. He has also a doctor's of ministry from the Master's Seminary, and his topic, his emphasis was on expository preaching. Significantly, after he got his MDiv at Master's, he began working in ministry at the Bible Church of Little Rock, Arkansas, which as soon as I heard that, I said, Lance Quinn, okay. A very dear friend of our church who's preached here on a number of occasions. And I'm also saying, I know a couple of people who know him pretty well then. Donna Sparza and Hope Price. their family went to that church while he was there, and I guess he was your, children's or youth pastor and so on. So he obviously comes highly recommended by at least 2 people in the church. And George Lawson, when he finished seminary, he went to the Bible Church at Little Rock, basically took Pastor Jeff's job when he left to go to Alaska. So Pastor George is one of the ones who is highly recommending it, because they've established a connection over the years. And likewise, Lance Quinn, who basically mentored Pastor Jeff, highly recommends him as well. So he left that church where he was an associate pastor and went in 2009 to Anchorage Grace Church. Yes, the Anchorage that's in Alaska, and that's where he is now. He's been there for like 12 years as their senior pastor. And you might be asking, well, okay, so why would he want to leave all that beauty in Alaska, and he's already senior pastor there? Well, when he arrived, Grace Church was, Anchorage Grace Church was a challenging environment for him, as it turns out. He was fairly quickly realizing that their Christian school, I think K through 12 Christian school, was sort of the tail wagging the dog of the church, which is not a very healthy relationship. And there were lots of issues and so on. Well, anyway, over the past 12 years, he's worked on shoring up the right kind of leadership and vision, relationship between the 2 institutions, and it was very, very, consistent in making a healthy church there. Obviously, he's been doing the regular expository preaching. He leads the elders. He oversees the Christian school as well, not as the administrator, but providing oversight. He developed doctrinal and philosophical unity. They were all over the map when he got there, and now they're much unified around doctrine and philosophy of ministry that we're comfortable with. His sermons are now broadcast Monday to Friday on 5 radio stations and rebroadcast to the interior bush of Alaska. He's, I guess, the only preacher whose messages are going out through a local Christian ministry. He's the associate dean and a professor at the Master's Seminary Anchorage Distance location. He's got several seminary students there in his congregation who he's helping to train up. And he's active in the Master's Fellowship in Alaska. Sounds a lot like us, right? That's, I think, an older picture of the family. A more recent picture of him is up in the upper right-hand corner. He and his wife, Judy, have 6 children, but if you count them here, it looks like 7. That's because their oldest daughter, Riley, is married, and she and her husband, Alex, are in university in New Mexico State. And their second-born, Logan, is at the Master's University also. The next one, Amelia, is a high school senior this year. And then they have 2 teen twins, and we haven't been introduced to them yet, so I don't know which is which. I suppose they'll let us know if it gets to that point. And then their youngest is Owen. So, some basic questions. Why would he want to consider moving on from his current church? Well, his answer is that the church now is on a solid footing. They're more sustainable. They've come a long way, but he's quite content that the church is well positioned now to take the next step in a healthy sort of way. Judy's, his wife's health has been mentioned as a consideration, although we don't know any of the details, and it's not clear how important that's weighing on this. But he's also mentioned on several occasions that wouldn't it be neat if he could finish out his ministry on the East Coast where he's from. He grew up in Virginia, around the Norfolk area, and Judy is from, most recently from upstate New York. And so while they have loved Alaska, and they wouldn't mind if the Lord's will is for them to continue there, there are lots of advantages, and they've got it to the place now where it's actually fun, and God's really working. But they're open to the possibility. This past summer, he took a sabbatical for some weeks. I forget now how many. Was it 8 weeks? And he was just searching the Lord's will and wisdom. He had no thought he didn't know about us at that point. But he was just thinking about the future and vision, and toward the end of that time became aware of our looking for a senior pastor here, our history, and so on. And he kind of dipped his toe into the water and started to see, well, what's the Lord got in mind here? And so, would Anchorage Grace Church be well cared for if he left? Yes. He now has 4 other seasoned staff pastors and 2 non-staff elders at the church, all very much like-minded, working together, same vision, and those other staff pastors are preaching every single week, I believe every single week, in their larger communities that they're shepherding. They have a strong deacon board and healthy relationships with the school now. He feels confident that if ever he were to move to a different ministry, that the church wouldn't, for the most part, skip a beat. And so that's encouraging. That was one of my first questions. How in the world is someone going to be willing to come here if it means moving away from his current flock? And it would have to be God orchestrating special circumstances to make that work. And then the question has come, and several people who have helped to interview him over the last month or so have asked the question, well, would this just be a stepping stone? Would he look to possibly leaving HBC at some point? And the answer he consistently gives is that he would have no intent to, no desire to. He would expect to finish out his ministry years here if he were coming here, whether we have lights or not. Okay. We had hoped that we would be entering that next phase starting actually tomorrow, and over the next week be having them here in person, but it's taking a little bit longer to make sure all the ducks are in a row. We've got a meeting of the minds and so on, but we're anticipating that may happen somewhat soon. Maybe not in November, but possibly before Christmas. We'll see. It's also possible, probably fairly likely, that even, I'm guessing, I don't know if you've had any conversation, Pastor Gabe, but we've been guessing that even if they were gung-ho and this looked like the Lord's timing and everything, they may choose to hold out through the end of the school year. They've got a daughter who's a senior in high school, right there across the street from their house in the church school. And so even if everything was clear, it may take a while, I'm guessing, for them to actually make the transition. But making a decision sometime between now and then would help both our church and their church to make that transition. And he may surprise us. They may say, well, no, actually, we're able to transition sooner than that, but we don't know. So keep praying. This is not a done deal. There could still be red flags, but it seems like God, and there are lots of things I haven't mentioned that seem like, wow, that's an interesting fit. We wouldn't have thought to ask about that, but there are some things that are encouraging that if God works it out, it would be clear that it's Him working it out. So, keep praying. I'll ask Pastor Gabe to come up also if you've got questions about this or really about anything else. And be sure to use the mic so we can hear you.
Thank you.
Kirk?
Pastor Allen, did you mention Pastor Jeff's age? What is his age?
49.
Oh, okay. And I was thinking a couple of questions, and maybe the second question is well, I'll go to the first question. Did Pastor Tom ever, in his network of possible replacements, did he ever give any cues, or did he mention any persons that he felt would be a good replacement?
Yes, actually he did. He hesitated to do that, but as I was, fearing or expecting, this is someone who currently has a flock and feels called to remain there. So that didn't go very far.
And then my only other question is, just for us to be able to pray accurately, this sounds like a very confidential process where if a pastor indicates that he's interested, it seems like it's a potential for compromising his relationship with his current congregation. So is that something for us to be really concerned about, is just the potential to do harm or for that person in expressing interest that they may harm themselves?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly all the scenarios you might have in mind, but after he spoke with us a time or two, and there were no particular red flags in our minds or his minds yet, he saw it was important for him to communicate with the rest of the elders at his church. And so he began that process there. And then since that time, he's expanded the number of people he's having this conversation with so that it's not going to be a shock to them if this is where the Lord's leading. I don't know if you know if he's made it broadly available. Probably not.
No, so they haven't announced publicly. It's not at a stage where that's necessary. But what they did decide as an elder group was that because of it, it looked like they were going to be coming out here, and he's done some traveling, gone to a conference, the sabbatical and whatnot. He's been away, a little bit over the last few months. So because they were looking to go away again, if people they agreed that if people asked, why is Pastor Jeff leaving? Where's he going? That they would just be honest and say that another church is pursuing him. So at this point, they're not concerned about people finding out. The whole leadership team, elders, staff pastors are fully in the know, and they've agreed that they'd be honest to the congregation if questions came up.
And I was curious whether any pastor would be reticent to express interest in Hope Bible Church because of that confidentiality potential difficulty.
Several of the applicants have said specifically, and we asked them in the application, I forget the wording of it, about confidentiality and so on.
Yeah, we asked, do you need this to be kept discreet?
That's it, yeah. And so some of them have said yes. And logically, they want to find out as much about us as we want to know about them so that both they and we can decide whether there's any point pursuing this. And so several of them said, yes, let's be discreet about this, at least for now. Yeah.
Roger? Oh, Ann, why don't you go ahead with the microphone?
Okay. I think the first slide said he was from a mid-size church, but it didn't tell us.
It's actually about the size of our church, about 500.
Well, I was thinking we are a mid-sized church
Yeah.
too, but it's quite different here. We only have one elder staff and one non-staff, and they've got 4 elders. That's going to be quite a shift for him.
And he knows about those differences. Yep.
Dana?
Hello. I do have my only question was that if indeed he wants to wait till the end of the school year to make that transition to for his family, having a high school senior, I completely understand that. Would we be in a position to wait until that happens if he turns out, Lord willing, that he turns out to be the choice? Are you all considering that would be something that would be accommodated?
Yeah, I can speak for myself, and Gabe might want to as well. Our preference would be to have somebody today.
3 months ago.
Yes, our preference would have been to have had someone 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. But we understand, we entered this process not knowing all the direction it's going to take, how long it's going to take. And that's only thinking about the selection process, let alone any time of transition between churches. So we're content with whatever the Lord makes clear is His will. And if His will is that the right person needs to wait until the end of the school year, we'll make it work.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to keep seeing local pastors, from the TMF churches come fill the pulpit at least a couple times a month. And so, we're going to be doing everything that we've been doing the last 6, 7 months. And if, by the time we make a decision, again, only the Lord knows the timing of that, whether that's December or January, then we're talking 4 or 5 months at that point. So, with the Lord's help, we can do it.
The flip side of that is if there are some red flags and he ends up deciding to withdraw from the process and we're back to square one, it could take a lot longer than that. We don't know. Yes, in the back.
Quick
Kevin.
question. Being that Pastor Kratz is still in the interviewing process, I see where we are, potential that he's not coming out until June. Why are we, and you're still interviewing other people, why are you letting us know about Pastor Kratz at this time? Why not further out?
We want to be as transparent with you as we can be.
Thank you.
And we're not actually interviewing anybody else.
I think you said you're going to be interviewing more people.
Not necessarily. I mean, basically, either we or Pastor Jeff needs to end our pursuit of each other. They call it candidating, like candid dating, right? Where you're talking, and if either of us decide that that's not where we want to be heading, then we go back to someone else. But until that happens, or unless that happens, he's clearly on paper, and even after we've gotten to talk with him, very clearly more what we're looking for than anybody else who's applied. Now, that doesn't rule out the possibility someone could apply tomorrow, and we would say, ooh, look at that. God's sovereign over all that. We'll have more opportunities. Don't feel like it's now or never, but we want to be available.
Thank you.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. I was just wondering, would there be any benefit to have someone go up to the church in Anchorage just to see how that's, is it really a strong congregation? To maybe just go up and check it out.
You're volunteering for a field trip?
I was looking to do a cruise with my wife.
Mixing business and pleasure, right?
Yeah, as it turns out, obviously when we mentioned Dawn and Hope, there's another couple in the church, James and Christiana McGrady, who are from Anchorage, and I was talking to James the other night, and they typically would attend another church in town, just that's, I assume, closer to where they were living, but they know about Anchorage Grace. I think he went to the school there when he was younger, and he's familiar, and he told me, hey, that would be a blessing if they could come out here. So we actually do have someone in our church who has experience with that church. But it's not a bad idea, for sure. We'll see.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it in our outline here, but one of the things we're going to want to do is to follow up with references and probably some church members there. But it's hard to do that if they don't know yet, and we don't want to put the horse before the cart. But yes, we need to do a lot of that legwork as well. Not sure it's going to require going up there. By the way, you can go to the website of that church and listen to his sermons. I would encourage you to do that. Give us your impact, your input. Yeah. Anything else? What's that, a hand back there? All right.
I'm looking, I'm not seeing any.
Gosh, it's always me. I always ask a lot of questions. I know. So I know that originally he was going to be coming here like this week and next week, and I know that that's been postponed, but are you confident that that postponement is not, wow, I want to say cold feet, but I don't mean it that way, but you know what is it a postponement because he's actually rethinking this himself?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it cold feet. I think what I would say is that there are just some more conversations that needed to happen. One of the things that they know is, and this is directly from Jeff, that if they came, that would form a relational bond. They just assumed they would love us, and we kind of assumed we would love them. And so they wanted to make sure that there were some conversations that we had before that happened to make sure everybody was as clear-eyed as possible. But they are very encouraged by the ongoing conversations we've had, and so we're hopeful that it'll happen soon. Roger, right behind you.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you invited us to go online and listen to some sermons, because I was thinking about that. But it also raises the question, during this candidating period, is there anything that you would advise that is kind of dumb for us to do during this candidating time that we should refrain from doing?
Well, if you know anybody at their church, don't spill the beans at this point, right? It's not been widely announced yet. But I'm not sure what else would fit in that category. Yeah. Don't. Brian asked about the possibility of actually contacting him. Let's leave it to the search process, the team, the pastors, to communicate with him. You'll have lots of opportunity to interact if and when they actually do come. And so the last thing he needs is 100 people giving him emails, you know. Answering questions he's already answered to the team, right? So, another question? Yeah.
Okay, so I was trying to figure out how to word this to make it about the process and not what he would do when he was here. So the question, three things caught my eye on that. One was the radio, the school, and then the distance master's
Campus,
campus in Anchorage. Obviously, I'm in Hope Academy. We have Discover Hope, and I know there's been some talk about future seminary or something. At least David Mora did when he was here. So I guess the question would be, as far as the process, was there any discussion about that whole involvement and what he might be involved in if he came here? In regards to those three things.
Yeah, I think I can start that, but go ahead.
Well, I think what I would say is, as we've been asking him questions, one of the things that I've appreciated as an expression of wisdom on his part is, rather than saying, hey, if I come to Hope Bible Church, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that, because he recognizes he doesn't know us very well, and what is existing in his church may not work or be appropriate in our church. And so he's given more kind of philosophy ways. He's like, well, here's what we do, here's why we do it, but I have no idea what I would do there. So obviously he has an understanding of the benefit of a Christian school, benefit of a seminary campus, radio ministry. So there's some good understanding there, and obviously experience as he's worked in those areas. But what that would look like if he came, he hasn't said, oh yes, we would convert Hope Academy to a 5-day Christian school, or yes, we're going to bring in the seminary right away. It just kind of depends on what the Lord has here as he comes, gets to know us, and then how the Lord works in our church.
And my impression from talking with him along those lines is that it wouldn't be right for us to expect a lot of new initiatives in his first year or maybe more. He's just getting to know us, and that's probably a wise thing on his part. Now, we're probably going to be, whoever comes in as senior pastor, we're probably going to be fairly early on including him in some pretty major decisions, and we want him to weigh in on it. And we talked about that a little bit with the facility here. A lot that we do with the facility depends on where we headed as a church, and we want to involve him there. But he was pretty reluctant to say, this is what you need, this is what I would do, but rather take the pulse first and then go from there. Another question?
Brandon,
Pardon me.
Just a comment, really. So we started coming in August, and I think there were 4 elders at that time, and now you're down to the 2 of you. And I want to say thank you. We've been in churches where, losing a senior pastor is a really big deal, and it can cause divisions and all kinds of things. And you guys have been very faithful in continuing the ministry, and I think I speak for all of us to just say thank you for your leadership.
And is there any way that we can be praying for you specifically during this time?
Well, thank you, Chris. Thank you for asking about prayer. We, on top of everything else, this is a major part of what we're doing now. And it involves lots of communications and ebbs and flows, and so just be praying for wisdom at every stage so that we'll recognize a red flag when we see it, right? We'll have the right questions. We'll be able to process information and input from all of you as much as we can, so that the Lord's leading in this is going to be clear to everybody. And that's not something we can manufacture, but we need prayer for that.
Okay, so I just want to say one other thing is also I would like to echo the appreciation and thank you. What you've had to work to do to hold up all of us who've been very grieved by the loss of someone we love so dearly as our senior pastor is not just because he's the senior pastor, but just because who Tommy is and was and will always be to us. So just to be able to do that is something that we all, I think, recognize and are so humbled and grateful for you. There is no division here. We're all here together, and we're so grateful for that. So thank you. The other thing I want to say is that I hope Jeff knows if he does choose to come here and it does work out, he has very big shoes to fill. And that's not going to be easy either.
He already knows that. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Whoop, whoop. Jim, you've already had a question.
And a trip to Alaska.
It is the last one. I was just wondering, are there any safeguards that you have as this pastor comes down, just to make sure it's a really good fit, and once he's here, maybe he's going off in a different direction. Just want to know if there's any safeguards that you have in place just to make sure that his vision is going to be pretty much what you all have laid out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To protect us.
Yeah, good question. Several things I would mention are we were very explicit in our job posting. You know, we posted our doctrinal statement, our philosophy of ministry, the criteria that I outlined here this morning, or this evening. And so he knows going into it what we're looking for. And we've got multiple people who have already been interviewing him and assessing and offering input and questions and so on. But a lot of that evaluation can't happen long distance. And so whoever goes through this process with us, when he comes here, we'll have opportunity to sit down person to person, face to face, and go through a lot of the evaluation, the kind of questions that you need to see how he's responding to and that kind of thing. It's one reason we've also started with and weigh very heavily the evaluation of others whom we trust. And we kind of started there, and we'll continue to seek the assessment of the pastors of our sister churches in the region. All those things combined, we're just relying on the Lord steer us in the right direction. Now, having said that, I've mentioned to a number of people that my perception of this situation that we're in is that our next senior pastor, whoever he is probably going to be, as much as anybody can be, like Pastor Leak in terms of doctrine, philosophy of ministry, passion for expository preaching. It's going to be a page out of the same book, no matter who it is. But anybody who comes in here is going to be a different person. And probably, I think, inevitably is going to have his own set of strengths and weaknesses that are independent of all those things. They're different from what we're used to with Pastor Leak. And I'm convinced that whatever those set of advantages and disadvantages are, God knows that's exactly what we need going forward. Given that the 90%-ish of everything else is lockstep in concrete, the uniqueness of it is going to be something that God's going to use for His glory and our benefit, whoever it is.
I'm not sure if this is a question you can answer offhand, but did he have any questions about us?
Yes. Not about you specifically. He had some questions about, someone has already mentioned that we're down to just 2 elders now, and asked questions about how that works, how we interact with and rely on teachers and leaders in other ministries, the deacon board as well. That's a different dynamic than he's used to, so he wanted to get comfortable with that. He's going to ask those kind of questions a lot if he came here. They're very interested. They have benefited greatly from having that Christian school right across the street from where they live, and their campus there with the church and the school and their house. It's just very convenient for them and their family to be involved in the life of all of that. It's going to be a different dynamic here, and so they're asking questions about that. And just sort of natural questions. I'm probably forgetting a lot of questions he's asked, but...
Yeah, I think at least a couple of us, I mean, you and me for sure, have had probably upwards of 15 hours of conversation over the last couple months with him. And so I'll just be honest and say I don't remember. He's asked questions, but we've just had a lot of good conversation and interaction.
Yeah, Kevin.
Each question brings out more. But the cost of living here in Washington, close to Washington, D.C., compared to Anchorage is totally different. Is that a factor as well when you're looking at salary and you're looking at a family of 6 or 7?
I think it is a consideration, but probably not in the way you're thinking. They're thinking the cost of living is higher there in many ways. And he's got free education for his children at a school right across the street. There are a lot of factors involved, but some of that stuff is some of the practicality we'd have to talk through, very frankly, with someone like that. Yeah.
Before he asked that question about cost of living, I was actually thinking, does his current church have a parsonage that they provide to him, or is it separate?
Actually, no, they own their own home. So we have learned a few things. Okay.
We got to make it till 9, folks. So think of a question here. It's going to be really awkward.
It's next week we have the daylight saving time thing, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Andrew.
Oh, right back here.
We'll make this the last question.
So one thing that drew us to Hope was when we watched the sermons and we watched Pastor Leak, we noticed that there was this sense that the way he dealt with the individuals in the church was very humble and loving on a very personal level. Not just that he could run these programs and have expository preaching, but also that he cared. There was like this true care for the individuals. Like I felt like, even though I never really talked to him personally, I felt like I could. Can you give any insight to how it is interacting with him and what you anticipate to see the way he interacts with the individuals in the church is? Because I've seen very strong pastors who maybe could be a little stubborn and maybe not be good on an interpersonal level with maybe every member. If that, I don't know. Anyways.
Right. Yeah, good question. And that's why, as one of our criteria, we're looking for someone who is a tender shepherd. And you can't necessarily identify that on paper. And so that's one of the reasons to have more personal time together and see him in action with our people, question him in detail, in private, all of that stuff. Yeah.
I will say, though, that just the interaction we've had with him over Zoom and over the phone are good, comfortable conversations. You know, you don't feel like you're being talked down to. You know, a lot of times I'll ask a question, like this happened last night when I was talking to him, and rather than just rattling off an answer, he asked me a question because he wants to know, okay, where are you coming from? So he's wanting to understand and dialogue rather than just let me tell you what the deal is. So I think in the limited interaction that is possible, there's been really encouraging personality that's come across. But yeah, the in-person is really going to ramp that up and give us a good sense of that. And my understanding from those who do know him in the room is that he and his wife are just the most wonderful people. So we're looking forward to experiencing that if the Lord wills. One more question? All right, since it's a different person. Really the last one.
Last question. Do we know what led him to go to Alaska in 2009 from Little Rock? From one A state to another?
Only that he had been an associate pastor in Little Rock for enough years. His ambition, I'm sure, was to be a senior pastor. And I'm not sure what the events were, but the Anchorage Church called him to be a senior pastor. And he went through a process to evaluate that. It seemed like a good fit, and so he went there. But he wasn't expecting to be an associate pastor forever. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight and asking really great questions. And we're grateful for your prayers on our behalf. And we know the Lord is answering those prayers through all of the things that we've talked about tonight, from finances to facilities and everything else, pastoral search. So we're so grateful for what the Lord is doing. He is building his church. He is sustaining us through a challenging season. And I'm just encouraged every Sunday, especially as we gather together with the saints, as we worship together, to see and hear the joy. And I'm just grateful, and Alan's grateful. And so let's thank our Lord together. Father, thank you for this evening and how it represents really what you're doing. We're just reflecting back on your faithfulness to us. And we do need your wisdom for the future. We know that a man plans his way, but you direct the steps. And you provide for every need that you know we have, even though sometimes we think we have needs that aren't truly needs. But Lord, you are so gracious, you are generous, you are kind and loving, and so we can trust you for our every need and for every situation in which we find ourselves. And so we just ask your blessing on all of our endeavors, whether it's facilities or it's pastoral search, every ministry as they're increasing their activities after COVID. Lord, we're eager to serve you, to worship you with our lives, and pray that you would accomplish your purposes in and through each one of us. So go with us now as we go to our homes and then this week to our work and school. May you use us as a light for Christ wherever we are. In Christ's name, amen.